Stardew Valley. Today we're talking about Stardew Valley, and it's a game that is the perfect example, a solo dev success story, and that's half of the reason why I like it. Irrespective of all of the gameplay elements, which I will get into. But Eric Baroni, the guy who created it, he goes by the name of Concerned Ape. I think he sets the example for every dev should strive to be in terms of their work ethic and attitude towards game development. And that's half the reason for the game's financial and critical success, I feel. I think back to, this is before I started playing the game, as a fan for quite a long time now, but, way back in the early access period when it was really starting to generate its first little bit of hype, he used to take people's save files from email. So people would email him their save files and he would fix them, or he would fix the save files for them by hand, individually, every time. And I think it's just that extra mile, which, has just sort of seeped into the game as a whole. If you look at every aspect of it, from its art direction to the gameplay and just the core loop, just everything that involved in the game goes the extra mile and has that little bit of extra detail and flair and panache that most games deserve, but very few get the time and attention that they rightfully deserve. And I think that's one of the benefits of making a game by yourself. It's outside of limitations outside of creating the game. You can work for it on it as long as you really want to, and that's not a luxury everybody has, but I think Eric did in many ways. And you look at how it turned out, 30 million copies plus sold. The guy, I'm sure, is living life the absolute fullest, and deservedly so. And I know there's more people working on the game now, but I think it's a reflection that because there's still not a huge amount, and they're obviously carefully selected by Eric, that the game has never really lost its soul since. Even throughout the continuous updates, he still has a huge hand in the development and everything that goes in and out. Half the reason I love Stardew so much is it's a simple concept. You are a farmer escaping the city and monotony of work life to you inherit your old grandpa's old ranch, and you gotta make of it what you want. Essentially, you can do pretty much whatever you want with that plot of land that you have. You can turn it into an absolute money-making factory, or you can carefully construct this a beautiful looking ornate farmland. And I love the different directions the game allows you to take. And I think the idea of escaping, which, as I said, is the core foundation of the Stardew Valley's opening narrative, I think it's reflective of the game as a whole. When you look at it, I think games fundamentally provide us a way to escape from something else, whatever that might be in our personal lives. And best games, I think, focus on that and are able to evoke those emotions which keep you lost in the world or the experience that you're going through. And I think that's a thing we're losing in the modern age of gaming, is a lot of games these days, and some of them I actually quite like, but they almost feel like a chore. They feel like a checklist. I think that's exemplified by the idea of a battle pass, right, in something like Fortnite, or the bounty and loot chase, rather, in something like Destiny. It almost feels like a chore to play, even but the core gameplay loop tends to keep you there. Stardew Valley has always been a bastion of the opposite, right? It keeps that it gives you that escape and gives you the freedom to do whatever you want, right? It's what you make of it. And interlaced within all of that is, of course, these brilliantly written character arcs. Each character in the village which you live in is, so different from one another. They're instantly recognizable from their pixel art style and outfits, but also just their personalities and the way they're written. I think it's such a powerful thing to do, especially in a game which doesn't actually have any voice acting. All of the dialogue is written and done through text boxes, and that almost knocks you down a peg just from the get, right? You're at a disadvantage because it's difficult to convey a narrative, especially in a modern game where, your AAA titles, for example, are so focused on high production value and cinematic feel. I think of stuff like God of War and Last of Us, Naughty Dog games, really. Stardew Valley doesn't have any of that, but at the same way, it's able to convey a narrative and bring forth these characters and their stories arguably far more effective than anyone else, right? And there's all these stories you get so attached with as you become friends with these characters. It's a gradual progression right through the gameplay. You end up becoming friends with them and you learn more about their stories, what they like and what they dislike. And if you played the game enough, you just end up stalking the characters' pathways through each day to give them gifts, etc., etc. I think that's a universal experience everybody goes through. And of course, I have to talk about the music, as I do with pretty much any game I talk about on this channel. It's phenomenal. And again, Eric did that all himself. Again, I don't know exactly the ins and outs of the software he used and how he got this instrumentation, all put together, but he clearly has a musical background. And as I'm speaking, I'm listening to the soundtrack right now to kind of evoke these ideas and emotions. And I think it comes back to what I said earlier about the extra, going the extra mile, adding that extra little bit of flair and character to every element of the game. And the music is no different. There's a piece of music, 3 pieces of music for each season in the game. On top of, each character has their own piece of music. I could go on. There's so many brilliant tracks, but each of them come back to that core idea of escapism. And I think those emotions that the game evokes as a whole, it brings you that just sort of sense of comfort and relaxation, which I think we could all use a little bit of in 2024. And I think most games these days don't provide that, as I said. And Stardew has always been the rare exception for me over the last few years. It's a game I never thought I would ever even, take one look at and never even try. I said the same thing about Dark Souls. And, lo and behold, I give it 5 minutes and I'm obsessed. And, as of the recording of this video, I think I've probably got near 200 hours in the game, which, a lot of experienced Stardew Valley players will tell you is peanuts in comparison. But I feel like that's more than enough time to really explore what the game has to offer. And going back to the music, something interesting that they actually worked on was a live orchestra performance for the very first time, touring across, it was the US and I believe the UK and some other places, correct me if I'm wrong. But I tried to get tickets for it, but it did sell out. There's a little bit of a side tangent, but, I think it just shows you I wouldn't even call it a cult following because it's such a big following and a universal experience for millions of people. But so many people care so passionately about such a small little game made by one guy that they're willing to travel across the world or, far and wide to go to these little concerts, and they sold out instantly. That just shows you the demand, right? And of course, there's other little elements like the board game, which I've been meaning to try out for a long time. And I think part of the reason the game is such a universal experience for so many people is the willingness to go the extra mile, as I said, going back to that phrase, but putting it on all manner of platforms. It's pretty much every modern platform you can think of the game is on. Another comparison is something like Minecraft or Terraria. They were absolutely everywhere. Whatever platform, you had the capability of playing on, you could play Stardew Valley too. And of course, on top of that, with the constant development updates, as I mentioned, I think it was the 1.5 update with the tropical island. Spoilers if you haven't played the game, but that was like a whole new area of the map. And it's like, how do they keep improving what is already quite literally a masterpiece? And it's kind of crazy that I'm even saying that about a little farming simulator inspired by another farming simulator, Harvest Moon, from years ago. But I think it shows you that scope isn't always, the defining factor on what makes a brilliant game. Of course, AAA projects can be brilliant and they can be the pinnacle of gaming. Baldur's Gate 3 was recently coming out last year. My favorite, cemented now, I think, is my favorite gaming experience of all time. And, a video I will absolutely talk about on this channel in the coming weeks or months. But we see a lot of misfires in that regard. Big games with big budgets that try and provide this huge spectacle when really they should be looking inwards, narrowing the scope and focusing on a more intimate story. I think those are the sort of games that I've always preferred, and Stardew Valley is no exception. It's a quaint narrative and tale of a small little village of 24 people or so, probably less. I'm not actually sure the exact number, but at the same time, even with that consideration, it feels larger than anything else I've ever played in a lot of ways. So I think there's something special to be said about that. And I know Eric, or Concerned Ape, is currently working on not a sequel but another game, another pixel art game, Haunted Chocolatier, which I'm sure down the line I will be playing the hell out of. He showed a few sparing screenshots here and there, and I can't wait. I wish I was one of those people who played back in the early access period of Stardew Valley, because that's when the excitement was really growing. But again, I keep calling back but what I said about going the extra mile, the extra flair and panache, that's something that's really carried the success of the game fundamentally. When you look at it, a lot of people rely on a flash in the pan success. Something like Lethal Company is a good example. It's still a popular game, or Among Us. They're games that are fundamentally fun to play, but they don't necessarily have the sticking and staying power gameplay wise and content wise to keep people playing over a long period of time. Stardew Valley ticks all of those boxes. As I said, consistent updates, consistent support, and fundamentally brilliant game. But yeah, I could ramble on about this game for hours, to be honest with you, but I want to keep this short. I want to keep it sweet and digestible for you guys. If you want to see more of this sort of stuff, like, subscribe, all of that. Go check out my MMA channel if you aren't already from there. I post weekly stuff, documentary style content, very different to this. But if that's your cup of tea, go check it out. If it isn't, you don't have to. But appreciate you. Go play the game if you haven't. Pretty damn fun.